Jen from Fabulous Paper Emporium. I am here again with another card making 101. So last week, I hit you with a ton of information, and I apologize for the length of the video. I never really intended to get to get that long, but I did also want to include some of the some card making. So hopefully you stuck with it and you're back with me again this week. Because we're actually making cards this week. So I have actually 4 different kinds, but I'm going to break it up into 4 different videos. And they probably are not going to all get posted today, but throughout the week, I'm going to be posting these quick little video tutorials on some really basic card styles. And we're really going to be focusing this week on layering, and it's going to be a lot of different scoring. So last week when we were using our 8.5 by 11, cutting that down to A2 card sizes, which is the 5.5 by 4 1/4 is the front size. So when we did those, we just basically folded the card in the base in half. So this week we are going to be layering, and I'm going to be showing you some of what I use in terms of the methodology, I guess, behind the card making. So hopefully you can take that and, apply it to your own cards. So again, we're going to be sticking with an A2 size card base. So that's either going to be 8.5 by 5.5 or 11 by 5.5, 11 by 4 1/4. Sorry, my mind kind of went a little strange there. Today I'm actually using two different collections. So this is brand new to the store, and it's a 6.5 6 by 8 paper pad. I'm going to slow down for a second because I'm mixing up my words. So it's a 6 by 8 paper pad by Simple Stories called the Simple Vintage Weathered Garden. And it is beautiful. It has got some really stunning papers in here. And this is kind of really what, in my eyes, Simple Stories is known for. So in this collection, you would get 24 sheets, double-sided. You do get some large ones, like this first one, where you could use just the heart if you wanted to cut that out, fussy cut it a little bit. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Double-sided again, like I said. Some of them I've already kind of ripped out because I wasn't sure what I was going to use them for. But after thinking, I kind of ended up on the papers that I have. So this, again, is really good because you do have these cut-aparts, journaling cards, that are quick and easy card fronts. So we're not using any of these today, but I figure throughout the week I probably will get to it. If not, it'll be next weekend. So I'm going to set that one aside. And then my other almost most favorite, I say almost most favorite because I feel like every paper pad I see is almost my favorite, is the Graphic 45 Alice's Tea Party. And I have used this and I love it. So this one, again, double-sided paper. You get 3 of each. So in this one, this is 8 by 8 paper pad. And you get 3 sheets of 8 different styles, and they're all 8 by 8. So you get 24 again. There's 8 different styles, and in here too, you'll see that there are also kind of their own version of what a cut apart would be. So you've got these cards, which you could use in pairs as a little folded. You can use 4 of them just as a card front. You can use each individual one, cut them out. And there's another beautiful paper like this one, which has a bunch of different, depending on how you cut this, you could have this strip with Alice and the Rabbit and the Mad Hatter, Queen, that kind of thing. You could have just that strip, so that could just be going along the bottom of a card. And we will be using that this week, I know. You can have the stack of teacups. You can have this little sentiment over here. So there's a ton that you can do with this. It just means cutting out the individual parts yourself. And you can make whatever strip or layering piece you would like. So I have got my sets already cut and ready to go. And the reason why I use 2 different sets this time is because I want to show you using a dark base versus using a light base. And so for the Alice's Tea Party, I pulled out this lovely ivory kind of color. We'll start with this one. And because I'm using a light base for this cardstock, I chose this really dark blue to be my first layer. And then my second layer is going to be this. I'm going to use this on part of it. And then we're going to flip it over and use this beautiful floral for another part. So again, because we're choosing paper all from the same collection, you don't have to worry about what goes with what. It's all going to go together. So there's that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Now it's just once you choose which pattern paper you want to use, then it's all up to you to kind of figure out what other cardstock, the solid cardstock you want to have go with it. So we're going to start with this one. So this first card is called, well, I've called it a flip flap card. It can be called a double flap card. And it's like I said, none of these are super difficult. I'm going to run through all the card sizes or the paper sizes with you right now. The only thing I haven't cut yet is this pattern paper. The pattern paper hasn't been cut yet because I want to go through that with you. And so I'm going to set that one to the side. And for the base, so we actually have 2 bases on this card. So we're going to have one piece, and this one is cut at 5.5 by 8.5, and we'll score this one. This base is cut at 2.5 by 8.5. Whenever I give you my measurements, it's always going to be width and height. That's just how I do it. So if ever you're unsure, you can always ask. I, get notifications when there's comments or emails. So do not hesitate to reach out if you are confused or unsure about anything that I've posted in the video or in the descriptions below, which is also where you'll find these measurements. Okay, so that is for the base. I've also cut out, now because we're going to have an outside part as well as an inside part, I've cut 2 of these, and this is going to be our first layer. So because I went with a light card base, I wanted to have a lot of distinction between the layers. So if you'll see here, once we layer that up, there's going to be a lot of difference between the light, the super dark, and then the pattern paper. And it just offers you that now the word is really not coming to me. There's a lot of, it's really not coming. Anyways, it just makes it pop. Let's just leave it at that. So I've got I have 2 of these pieces, and these are cut at 5.25 by 4. So the reason why I did 2 is we're going to put one on the outside, and then one is going to go, when you open the card, is going to go on the inside. Okay, so we've got 2 of those. I also cut 2 of the smaller ones because we're going to have one that goes again on the outside of the small flap. So this one is cut at 2.25 by 4, and we're going to do that 2 times because we're going to do on the inside as well. Okay. Now, because we're going super dark for the first layer, our second layer, not a problem. We've got our beautiful designer paper for the outside. Now for the inside, where you're going to want to write a little note or sentiment or, a message of some sort, you're going to need something lighter. So that's why for the inside of both of these, I've also cut another piece of the ivory. And so this is going to be 5 by 3 3/4 for the larger piece. And it's going to be 2 by 3 3/4 for the smaller piece. And if you'll notice, each layer is 1/4 of an inch difference on the width and on the height. So that's something important to remember. So I'm going to set these aside. I'm going to get out my paper trimmer. And our paper for this one, the strip is at the top. That's just how it comes out of the book. So something to be mindful of if your paper really is something that is very directional. And let me get something here. Florals, not so much, but this one that has writing on it really does need to be applied in this manner. Otherwise, it may look a little bit funny. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. This one is kind of a little bit, you know, it can be used in a lot of different directions, but for this purpose, I just want to keep it in this direction. So I'm going to be using this beautiful plaid for the large piece. And so when we're cutting this, I want to make sure that I am cutting the width, because this is how I want to have it placed. So the first cut that I'm going to make is going to be 5. So I'm going to line up my left side with my 5-inch mark. Okay. And then I'm going to cut. Okay. So now we have our width. So this now is going to, if I grab my dark blue, so this is the first layer. My second layer, just if you look at the width, is going to leave us with 1/8 of an inch border on either side. So now I'm going to turn it, rotate it 90 degrees, and then we're going to make our second cut. And the second cut for this one is 3 3/4. So again, we're lining up our left side with 3 3/4, closing it, and slice. So now we have our perfect layer for the front. Now, because on the top for the smaller piece, if I use this as my first layer, so basically I am going to need another piece to go on top of that. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to use the floral side for this top piece. And again, I know that both of these go because they're like opposite sides. So again, no muss, no fuss. So for this one, I'm going to keep it in this direction. I still have my label at the top. So I'm going to do this one at 2 1/4. So again, lining up my left side with the 2 1/4 mark, I'm going to slice that. And that's going to be by 4. Okay, and so I line up my left side with the 4-inch mark, and I have just enough to get all of those cuts done. And so again, if I layer this up, whoops, I made a mistake. Sorry, that was supposed to be 3 3/4. I am terribly sorry, but this is also why I dry fit. And obviously, I was looking at the wrong thing entirely. Okay, so this top layer piece is 2 by 3 3/4. And again, that will leave us with a 1/8 border all the way around the outside. I really, really apologize for that. I was looking completely at the wrong measurements, obviously. Okay, so now that our cutting is done for our designer paper, we're going to leave this, never throw away these scraps. These scraps are completely usable. So I'm going to set those off to the side. Whoops, I need my scoreboard. So I'm just going to change the cutting blade for the scoring blade, and we can score our base. So the first base we're going to grab is the piece that is cut 5.5 by 8.5. We're going to rotate it so the 8.5 is across the top, and we're going to line up our left side with 5.5. no, sorry, with 4¼ Sorry, I've got a couple of other cards that are 5½, and I guess I'm just in that mode. Okay, so 4¼ is on the left-hand side, and we're going to score, run that through a few times. So we have our neat score line there. And the next piece that we're going to grab is the one that is 2½ by 8½. Again, we're going to duplicate the same thing, turn it so that 8½ is at the top. We're going to move our our left hand edge to the 4¼ mark, and we're going to score. And that's all the scoring we have for this one. So this, I'm going to put my cutting board or paper trimmer away. So we have 2 pieces that are scored. So we can fold this in half. Make sure I've got my bone folder. So I'm folding it, making sure that all the sides are aligned. And then we're going to burnish with our bone folder. And we're going to repeat the same thing with the smaller piece, the smaller base. So this is going to be actually a lot of layers because we're essentially doing 2 little cards. And what will happen is once we're done with this one and the base one is this layers up nicely and we actually have a card on a card. So it's like a double card. Okay, so we're going to work on our big base first. And we're going to start with our layers. So the first layer is our dark cardstock. So grab your liquid glue. Make sure that it's free. I'm going to grab my blue layer. Try to go as close to the edge, but you don't need to add, if you're using like a liquid glue, you don't have to go right to the edge. In fact, it's probably good that you don't, because then you'll have some glue seeping out, which isn't the end of the world. It can get messy though, so just something to be mindful of. I even have some on my thumb. Okay, so we apply that as centered as we possibly can. Okay, so there we have our first layer. We're now going to grab our second layer, which is this cardstock, this beautiful paper, and that's going to layer right on top. So that's the other thing. And I apologize. I mean, sometimes I make mistakes, but if you're dry fitting, you'll know in advance if you need to trim it in any way, shape, or form. And then I usually go back to my notes at that point. So I'm dry fitting this. I like the way it looks around the outside. So I'm going to grab my cardstock and again, kind of apply glue around the perimeter. And there isn't like gobs and gobs of glue. This is, you know, I wouldn't say lightweight cardstock, but it is not like the heaviest. So how I'm applying this, it's liquid, so I do have some wiggle room, but I'm not letting go of this side. So I do have control over where the cardstock goes. I like how this is looking. And as I kind of lay this down, I see that it is pretty much centered. And we have our base. Okay, so our base, whoops, I had to kind of move it off screen to flip it up to grab hold of it. So that is our base for the outside. So we're going to set that aside. We're going to bring in our small base. So the small base, again, will flip upwards. And we're going to grab our dark cardstock, our first layer. Again, dry fitting that to show that it is cut correctly. And then we're going to grab our liquid glue. Again, do a bit of a perimeter. Just like that. And do the same thing. It may be easier because the length is significantly longer than the width to rotate it and do it in this direction. Okay, so this way your fingers, otherwise your fingers are really in the way of applying the paper if you go in the other direction. Just so long as every time you layer, you just make sure that you have this in the right direction. That's the only thing. Okay, and then we have our cardstock, our top layer, which is going to be applied like this with this beautiful floral. And again, yep, that's how it goes. Again, it's, you know, there's some patterns that are definitely directional that you can, you know, 100% know which way is up and which way is down. And this one, actually, I'm just referring to my other piece. This is how it goes. So I'm applying it this way. Okay, and I like the way it looks there. Okay, so ultimately this is how our card is going to look. Pretty cool, eh? I love this card. Just because, for the simple fact that it's like a card on a card. So you have like 2 areas to write little messages. If you had, you know, 2 different little stamps, you can always use those on the inside as well. Super, super cute. But this is also why we've done 2. And this is completely optional. Obviously, if we left it like this, it is completely fine. You can write and stamp on the inside. Same thing with your larger card base. You can write and stamp on the inside just as is. But I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of more layers. So for the small card, I'm going to flip this open. I'm going to grab my dark blue. And we're going to get our glue on there. It's a little bit more challenging when you've got a fold here. So sometimes if you lift it up, it's easier to tell, obviously, where that score mark is. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to press that down. And then I'm going to reach for my second little ivory piece. That's going to be my top layer. My suggestion is that if you're stamping, that you stamp prior to applying it. I'm not sure what I'll be using this card for, so I'm just making a few cards in advance for a couple of different reasons. So ultimately, when it comes to stamping, then I will just have to be very accurate with it. And there you have our top little card. We'll bring in our larger base and duplicate what we just did, but we're just going to do it with the larger one. So I'm taking my dark blue first. Applying my glue. And again, kind of lifting that up to give me a better idea of the border. And then we press down. And then we're going to apply our top layer. We're almost done with this card. And like I said in our first episode last week, is, you know, simple doesn't necessarily mean that it's plain. Is we're using a lot of fantastic pattern paper, and you let that pattern paper you know, it speaks for itself. Okay, so to apply this piece now to the card front, there's 2 methods you could use. Liquid glue would work just fine. You can also use double-sided tape. It really kind of is completely up to you how you'd like to go ahead. I'm just going to use some liquid glue for today. Excuse me. If you were going to use some liquid glue, my recommendation would be You could apply a strip on each side. You could apply some glue over top to allow you that little bit of wiggle room. So I've got this in the right orientation. I am going to swing this around so I have a good vantage point of where my cardstock is at the top and at the bottom. And then we're just going to lay that down. Whoops. Oh my goodness. When I got a little bit zealous there, almost ripped it right off. Okay. And so there you have it. So that is the flip flap card or the double flap card. So it sits up like that, but like I said, you've got two areas for some fantastic writing, a message, sentiments. You can easily stamp somewhere on the front, but I like this card the way it is. It's just, again, you're letting your pattern paper speak for itself. Okay, so now that we're done with the card using a light base, I'm bringing in the Simple Stories cardstock, and this is going to use a dark base. So for this one, we have a dark charcoal gray. We're going to be cut and scored at the exact same measurements. Okay, so for the large, again, we're doing 5.5 by 8.5. For the small, we're doing 2.5 by 8.5. This time I'm using light layers. So where I used dark because I had a light base, now I'm flipping it around and using a dark base with a light first layer. And again, for the inside, because obviously you wouldn't be able to, well, you could, I guess, if you had a white gel pen, something like that, silver, that would show up on the dark. But by and large, when I stamp in black. So the white is definitely going to show up a little bit more. So again, I cut 2 pieces of my first layer, 5.25 by 4, and 2 for the small base at 2.25 by 4. So that's all done. The only thing I have not done is my second layer. So for this one, because I'm using dark and then light for my first layer, my pattern paper that I chose is dark as well. So I like going dark, light, or light, dark, light, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to use this polka dot for my first layer for the larger. I'm going to take out my paper trimmer and swap out the scoring blade for my cutting blade. The polka dot really isn't directional, so I can cut it in whatever way I feel I'm going to get the most out of my paper. So because it's 6 wide, I'm going to likely cut 5.25 over, but I'm going to do my length first this time. Whoops. Cutting blade came right out. And I'm going to line my left side with the 4-inch. Okay, so this will be for the height, and now 5.25 is going to be for the length. And again, I don't have, this little strip may seem like it's small, but it's definitely worth saving because there are plenty of opportunities for us to use that later on. So I am, you know what? I'm looking again. I forgot that this is not our first layer. It's our second layer. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, get with it. Okay, so it needs to be 5. And I'm even going to keep that strip by 3 3/4. Okay. Oh, okay, so this will layer nicely on our first layer. And then our second layer, I'm going to use this one. The opposite side for this is this beautiful butterfly paper, but I just am in love with this darker one. So because the butterflies are definitely directional, we are going to want to make sure that we're cutting this properly. Okay, so if it's the simplest way is to put it in the direction that it's going. Okay, and then the first measurement that I've given you, which is 2 inches, is going to be our width. Okay, so we line up our left side with the 2-inch mark, and we're going to cut. And then we're going to spin it around. My cutting blade keeps falling out. So we're going to spin this around, and we're going to line this up with 3 3/4. And cut. Okay, and this will layer nicely with that piece. Perfect. Okay, so we are, oh, I do need to score my bases really quickly. Thought I had done them in advance, but I have not. So I'm going to switch out my scoring blade. And for the 8.5 across the top, we are lining that up with 4 1/4. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing. So 2.5 by 8.5, and we're going to line that up at 4 1/4 as well, and score that. Okay, now we're done with the paper trimmer. And put that away. And we're going to burnish these, fold and burnish our bases really quickly. So again, making sure that the bottom and the sides are all nicely aligned. And bring in our big one. So again, what we talked about last week is on this side, there is a little valley where we scored. On the inside is where we have a little raised part. And I like to score it so the valley is facing up and the little ridge is on the inside. Okay, so let's get that to meet. Okay. And we burnish. Okay, perfect. So now we've got our 2 charcoal gray card bases done. I'm going to set those aside, and we are going to layer. So we're going to do our big one first, and we're going to do the outside the exact same way that we did the Alice's Tea Party. So I'm going to take my white piece, apply my glue, and apply that much in the same way. So just keeping my right hand on the cardstock so I can position it properly. And there we have it. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with the polka dot. And apply my glue. And here we go. Okay, so we set that aside, and now we bring in our smaller base. Dry fit, make sure I haven't made any mistakes there. I'm going to have to maybe write them on different cue cards. I have everything written all together and, you know, different lines, but apparently my eye was kept going to that first layer sizes, so I apologize again. Okay. Move that around. I love liquid glue for that reason. It's very, very, very forgiving. And so that's how that front is going to look. I love, 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 love this paper. So for the inside, so what we did for the previous card, for the Alice card, on the inside, we put the layer of blue and then put another layer. Again, that is completely optional. You don't have to cut those extra pieces if you don't want them. I just feel it just adds, again, that extra interest for the inside. Because our base in this case is already dark, I don't know what that is, we're just going to add the one layer of white, which is going to allow us to be able to write, stamp, what have you with a sentiment. So a little bit less layering on the inside, but adding that little bit of interest all the same. Okay, so I got the white glued and ready to go. And perfect. And then we're going to duplicate that with our small base. As soon as I can get it open. My fingers are not working today. Apparently neither is my brain, so I apologize for everything. But hopefully you're finding this easy to make still. Okay. So we've got our big card done, small card done, and we're going to add our glue to the back side. You can put this piece basically wherever you want. So long as the flap is at the right, like if you want to put it right in the middle, that's fine. I like it a little bit offset. I can put it to the other side if I wanted to, but again, I like spinning it around so I can really make sure that the top is aligned properly. That is way too close to the edge. You don't get any of that polka dot coming off. There we go. Okay, and again, just make sure that you're not like rubbing it this way like I did and almost ripped it off. So here we have our two options. One with our dark base, light first layer with dark on top. And this one with our light base, dark first layer and light on top. Well, lighter on top. So those are our two cards for today. Hopefully you found this useful or helpful in any way, shape, or form. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and the bell will notify you every single time I have a new video posted. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Stay safe. Stay well. Bye.